Captain Draxith's eyes narrowed as his fleet broke through the ion storm surrounding Earth's atmosphere. The sharp, metallic scent of the ship's inner air filtration system mingled with the tang of interstellar dust that clung to the hull. The heavy thrum of the engines vibrated through his feet as the Gormarian fleet, having traveled for cycles, finally arrived at their destination. "This is it," he muttered, his deep voice resonating in the quiet of the command deck. "The new Deathworld. Let's see what the humans are capable of." He flexed his fingers over the command console, the touchpad cool beneath his hands. The planet loomed beneath them, a swirling mix of gray clouds and violent storms, its atmosphere churning like the belly of a beast. No other species had ever dared settle here, and that was the way the Galactic Council had always intended it. Earth was a place of chaos, a savage world incapable of supporting life beyond its indigenous predators. But the new readings, sent across the galaxy, changed everything. The Gormarians had been sent to finally map and neutralize this world's dangerous ecosystem. There would be no survivors, and Earth would become just another hollow shell in the Gormarian archive. "Activate the sensors," Draxith ordered. His voice was edged with the kind of detached confidence that came from years of victory, but there was a quiet undercurrent of unease he did not fully recognize. A shrill beep pierced the silence. "Sensors online, Captain," Lieutenant Salor reported. "Analyzing surface conditions now." The display flickered to life, revealing a planet more complex than they'd imagined. The data coming in was both fascinating and alarming. Massive electromagnetic pulses, violent tectonic shifts, and an atmosphere thick with toxic gases. As the analysis continued, Draxith's eyes scanned the screen, locking onto a single point. New York City, the most populated region of the planet, and yet, it appeared active. "It's not as abandoned as we were led to believe," Salor observed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We expected a wasteland," Draxith mused, stepping closer to the screen. "But what we're seeing, there's movement, organized movement." "Are there survivors?" Salor asked. The captain didn't answer immediately, his mind racing through possibility. He'd never truly believed humans to be a threat. Primitive, barely able to survive on their own planet. But what was this? A thriving human city amidst the chaos of a death world. "Prepare the landing craft." "We begin the survey immediately," Draxith commanded, the cold authority in his voice, still undisturbed by the strange uncertainty that had crept into his thoughts. The landing craft descended through the storm-racked atmosphere, cutting through the turbulent winds with ease. As the craft's exterior temperature soared from the friction, Draxith's thoughts shifted. It was not so much fear he felt, it was the sheer weight of uncertainty. Could a world this dangerous truly harbor life capable of organized survival? The craft touched down with a thunderous jolt. The air inside was stifling, a mixture of heat, dust, and the faint scent of something sharp, unfamiliar. Through the viewport, New York sprawled out before them, a city of towering skyscrapers that somehow stood in defiance of the storms around them. Lightning crackled in the distance, illuminating the wreckage of a once thriving civilization. The place had been ravaged, but there were signs of life. Draxith rose from his seat, commanding the crew with his presence. "Disembark. Secure the perimeter. We need to understand how they've survived here." The door hissed open. The air outside was thick, with the acrid tang of something burning hanging in the haze. The distant sound of crashing metal, something big, echoed through the street. Beneath their boots the ground was uneven, buckling in places as though the planet itself had been forced into submission. As the crew stepped out, the first human they encountered wasn't some wild survivor or scavenger. It was a soldier, crouched behind a rusted wreckage, eyes narrowed as they surveyed the new arrivals. The figure stood, his posture straight and defiant, the heavy weight of a rifle slung over his shoulder. His clothes were tattered, his face dirt-smeared, but his gaze, that was the look of someone who had seen more than just destruction. It was the eyes of a leader, a survivor. Draxith's lips curled into a smirk. "So this is what passes for a human warrior. This should be interesting." The human stepped forward, holding his ground despite the overwhelming force of the Gormarian fleet behind him. His voice was sharp, cutting through the static of the chaotic cityscape. "I'm Captain Alden Vance. You've made a mistake coming here." Draxith raised an eyebrow. "Mistake?" His voice was heavy with disbelief. "This is a death world. You're lucky to even be alive, much less standing in front of me." Vance's eyes flickered to the armored soldiers behind Draxith, then back to the Gormarian leader. You think we're lucky? He spat the word as though it was something foul. You've got no idea what you're dealing with. Before Draxith could respond, the crack of a distant rifle shot rang out, followed by a series of explosions that sent dust and debris into the air. The humans moved with a purpose, disappearing into the shadows, vanishing into the ruins, as if they had never been there. Get back inside, Draxith barked, his hand moving instinctively to the hilt of his energy blade. His voice was sharp, the tone of a leader unaccustomed to being challenged. Vance's figure reappeared briefly, standing in the doorway of a ruined building. If you want to survive this, you'll need to learn what it means to be human. Otherwise, you're just another enemy on a planet full of them. Draxith's grip tight. His instinct told him to strike, to crush this insignificant pest beneath his boot. But something held him back, a flicker of uncertainty. The humans had faced dangers greater than any Gormarian threat. They had learned to survive on Earth, a world that broke every rule of survival the aliens knew. A low rumble shook the ground beneath them. The sky above flashed with unnatural brilliance, and Draxith's jaw clenched. Deploy all units, they won't survive for long. As the Gormarian forces fanned out across the city, Vance's voice echoed through the ruins, a defiant challenge in the face of certain annihilation. You'll learn soon enough, Captain. This is our world, not yours. The storm that followed was not of nature. It was the beginning of war, and the humans were ready to show that Earth's Deathworld could become the Gormarians' worst nightmare. The metallic clang of the Gormarian boots echoed against the jagged ruins of New York City, as Draxith's soldiers spread out, their weapons trained on every corner, every shadow. The landscape was alien to them, broken streets, towering wrecks of buildings that had once been the pride of humanity, and an atmosphere thick with tension. The air here was different, heavier, as though the earth itself was preparing for the inevitable storm. Draxith clenched his fists, the raw energy of the battle making his body hum with anticipation. They were about to break through the humans' defenses, and when they did, it would be swift, decisive. But the human resistance had already retreated, melting into the shadows. This isn't a battlefield, Draxith muttered under his breath. This is a trap. Sir, there's no sign of organized retreat, Zaylor reported, his voice steady, though the uncertainty in his eyes was hard to mask. It's as if they've vanished, Draxith growled, turning toward the horizon, where the last remnants of the human soldiers had disappeared. His mind raced. The humans had shown no fear, only the kind of cold, calculating resolve that only the most desperate could muster. And it unsettled him. No one had ever dared stand against the Gormarian might like this. They didn't retreat. They're watching us, Draxith said, a glimmer of realization flashing in his eyes. They're waiting for us to make the first move. In the heart of the crumbling city, Captain Alden Vance and Sergeant Marisol Cole crouched beneath the skeletal remains of a collapsed skyscraper, their breaths shallow, eyes scanning the approaching Gormarian soldiers. The world was chaos, a never-ending storm of sounds, sights, and smells that assaulted their senses. Vance's fingers tightened around the grip of his weapon, the cool metal contrasting against his sweaty palms. The low rumble of distant thunder mirrored the growing tension in the air, and the acrid scent of burning debris from the last firefight filled his nostrils, mixing with the faint undertone of wet earth. This is their move, Marisol whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes flickered toward the advancing enemy. They're more cautious than I expected. Vance nodded, his eyes narrowing as he adjusted the scope of his rifle. The Gormarians had deployed the full force of their landing teams, but the humans hadn't yet revealed their most dangerous asset, Earth itself. They had learned long ago how to fight on this planet, how to use every inch of its terrain as an advantage. You know they'll come for us, Vance murmured, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of certainty. We can't hold them off forever, but we don't need to. We just need to keep them guessing. Marisol offered a thin, knowing smile. Let them underestimate us. As the Gormarians pressed deeper into the heart of the city, their weapons ready, the humans began their plan in earnest. From all directions, traps that had been laid days ago began to spring. The first Gormarian squad that entered the ruins was met with a barrage of fire from the shadows. The soldiers dropped like stones, their bodies jerking in the air before collapsing in a heap. The sound of their last breaths was muffled by the crashing explosions that followed, sending plumes of dust and rubble into the air. The city seemed to tremble with the force of the blast. Now, Vance ordered, strike fast, strike hard. Marisol's fingers danced over her control pad, activating a dozen more explosive charges buried under the rubble. A series of deafening booms shattered the tense silence. The Gormarians scrambled, their sensors whirling in confusion, as the humans disappeared again into the city's vast underbelly. Draxeth's forces faltered for a split second, caught off guard by the humans' relentless assault. He watched as one of his officers, Lieutenant Corin, knelt beside a downed soldier, his hands moving quickly over the body, as if searching for something. "Report," Draxeth barked, his voice laced with frustration. Corin looked up, his face grim. "Captain, they're using the environment against us. The city is rigged with traps. Each building's a potential minefield. Their movements are coordinated, but they're not taking any risks." Draxeth's fists clenched. "So they're hiding, waiting for us to make a mistake." Corin nodded. "Exactly, sir. They know we're hunting them, and they're using it against us. It's not just guerrilla tactics. It's like they've become part of the land itself." The captain paused, absorbing the information. "They've adapted faster than I expected." In the darkness of the city's underground passages, Vance and Marisol made their way to a hidden command center, a small makeshift facility dug into the side of the ruins. The hum of their old equipment, clumsy by alien standards, filled the cramped space. The glow of dim monitors cast an eerie light over the room, the air thick with the scent of old coffee and the metallic tang of weapons. "We need to move quickly," Vance said, his voice strained but resolute. "They'll be onto us soon. Once they get a taste of our traps, they'll adapt, and then we won't have the element of surprise anymore." Marisol's hands flew over a keyboard, sending a coded message to the other resistance cells scattered across the city. "We'll keep them off balance," she said, her eyes flicking to the screen. "But we'll need a bigger distraction if we're going to push them out of this sector." "Leave that to me," Vance replied, his lips curling into a slight smile. "I've got a few surprises left." Above them, the Gormarian forces were regrouping. They had been pushed back, humiliated by humans they once believed would be no match for their advanced weaponry. But the Gormarians hadn't yet seen the full extent of what Earth could offer. They hadn't realized that the city in all its chaos was not just a battleground. It was alive, pulsing with an energy they couldn't yet comprehend. Draxeth stood at the forefront of his forces, scanning the city with a calculating gaze. His soldiers had been battered, but the Gormarians were resilient. They would push forward, break through the barricades, and reclaim control. He clenched his fists. "This world will break. It's just a matter of when." But as he turned to face his soldiers, the ground beneath him shook violently. A distant rumble grew louder, followed by the sharp crack of glass shattering, followed by something else, a sound like 1,000 footsteps pounding the earth. The air seemed to grow heavier with every passing second, as though the city itself had risen up against them. "What is that?" Corin asked, his voice tight with concern. Draxeth turned toward the noise, his gaze narrowing as the first signs of the coming storm emerged. The ground rumbled once more, and the very skyline seemed to twist and bend in the chaos, signaling the beginning of an even greater battle. For the first time, Draxeth felt a seed of doubt. They had underestimated Earth, and more importantly, the people who called it home. The ground trembled beneath Draxeth's feet, a deep rumble that seemed to originate from the planet itself. His eyes scanned the horizon, the cracked and crumbling city stretching out in front of him, its ruins now alive with human activity. The humans had pushed back, but it was clear to him now that they were more than just survivors. They were fighters. For the first time, Draxeth wondered if they might have underestimated the Earthlings entirely.
"What the hell was that?"
Corin asked, his voice taut with anxiety. His hands were gripping his rifle tighter than ever, his senses alert to every sound and movement. "I don't know," Draxeth replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the tremors had originated. The human resistance was elusive, their tactics difficult to predict. The city was a labyrinth, shifting beneath them, and it seemed as though every step brought new surprises. Before Draxeth could give the order to advance, a deafening explosion shook the ground, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. The shockwave reverberated through the streets, causing the Gormarians to stagger back, shielding their faces from the falling rubble. The city seemed to explode in on itself, its very foundations cracking, as if responding to an unseen threat. "Ambush!" shouted Zalor, the sharpness in his voice betraying his growing concern. Draxeth's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but he knew better than to charge blindly into the unknown. The humans were clever. No doubt they had laid traps around every corner, every piece of the city. The battle had turned into something much more than a simple military conquest. This was a fight for survival. In the hidden corridors beneath the city, Vance crouched low beside a crumbling pillar, his breath steady as he listened to the commotion above. The vibrations in the ground were unmistakable. The Gormarians were on the move again, but this time, the humans had something up their sleeves. "They're coming," Vance murmured, his voice low but determined. Marisol didn't respond immediately. She was studying a series of holographic maps, tracing the paths of the Gormarian soldiers with swift fingers. The maps flickered in and out of focus, as the unstable energy fields around the city interfered with the signal. The air smelled of burnt metal and dust, the sharp tang of gunpowder lingering from earlier skirmishes. She wiped her brow, the grime sticking to her face, but her focus never wavered. "They won't know what hit them," she said finally, her tone edged with anticipation. "We've rerouted their patrols into sectors they won't expect. We'll hit them at every turn." Vance nodded. He wasn't going to make the mistake of underestimating them. The humans weren't just hiding, they were strategizing, turning every inch of Earth's hostile environment into a weapon. He could feel the tension building in his chest. As the reality of their situation set in, they were outnumbered, outgunned, but they had something the Gormarians lacked: the advantage of knowing the land, the will to fight for it. "You ready?" Vance asked, turning to face his team. A chorus of affirmatives rang out, each soldier a reflection of the gritty determination that had gotten them this far. "We move out in 5, Vance said. Above them, Draxith's forces began their push, cautiously advancing through the narrow streets of New York. The air was thick with smoke, the sky darkened by the looming storm clouds that seemed to hang over the city like an omen. The Gormarians moved with precision, though their steps were now more deliberate. Every corner was a potential ambush, and every shadow concealed a threat. Draxith's mind raced, calculating, anticipating their next move. But something about this felt different, more personal. Coran was the first to notice the change. "Sir, they're gone." His voice was tinged with disbelief. "We've lost contact with the other squad. They're vanishing into thin air." Draxith's eyes narrowed. "Impossible." "It's true, no sign of them. Just emptiness." It didn't make sense. The humans couldn't have just disappeared. They weren't ghosts. They had to be here somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. "They're testing us," Draxith growled, clenching his fists. "They're drawing us in. They want us to chase them." Zalor stood beside him, his expression serious. "Do we pursue?" Draxith hesitated. The logic was there, but so was the humans were smart. They wouldn't retreat unless they had something far worse in store. But he wasn't the kind of leader to back down now. "Forward," Draxith ordered. "Find them. We end this now." Vance and his team moved silently through the catacombs of the city's abandoned subway tunnels, the eerie screech of old trains long past their prime echoing through the damp air. The walls were lined with thick rusted pipes that hissed and creaked, the sound mingling with the distant rumble of the Gormarians above. They moved quickly, their footsteps barely making a sound against the concrete floor. Every sense was on high alert. This was the moment, the culmination of all their planning. Marisol glanced at Vance, her eyes steady. "Ready?" He gave her a brief nod, his jaw clenched. They had planned for this day, prepared for the worst, but no plan ever survived contact with the enemy. It would take everything they had, and more, to succeed. "Move out," Vance ordered. "We have one shot at this." The Gormarians, still in search of the elusive resistance, descended further into the city's bowels, unaware that they were walking into another trap. The smell of wet earth and rusted metal grew stronger as they ventured deeper into the labyrinth beneath New York. The air was thick with the scent of something almost tangible, something ancient, like the city itself was alive, breathing, watching them. "Keep your eyes open," Draxith ordered, his voice low but commanding. "They'll be here. I can feel it." Coran's hand gripped his weapon tight. He could almost hear the faintest sound of something moving ahead of them, a scraping of metal, a distant thud that sent a chill through his spine. Suddenly a blinding light exploded from the shadows, and the world seemed to tear apart around them. Explosions rocked the tunnels, filling the air with smoke and fire. The Gormarians were thrown into disarray, their world spinning as the ground beneath them cracked open like a wound. The humans had found them again, their faces grim but determined. Vance's voice crackled through their comms, low and sharp. "We've got one shot, and we're taking it. Don't let up." As Draxith scrambled to regain control, his senses overwhelmed by the chaos of the battlefield, The full scale of the human threat began to sink in. The war was no longer about fighting for dominance. It was about survival, and as he stood in the heart of a collapsing city, with the weight of his fleet's failure pressing down on him, Draxith knew that this battle was only the beginning. The humans had drawn the first blood, but the question now was, could they keep up the fight, and if so, at what cost? In the distance, the unmistakable sound of a growing storm, both literal and metaphorical, rumbled ominously, as if the city itself was bracing for the next chapter of this conflict. And Draxith, despite his own experience, felt that gnawing doubt again. He had underestimated the humans. The city was a ghost now. Once a vibrant landscape filled with noise, movement, and life, it had become a twisted labyrinth of shattered glass, bent steel, and ashen skies. The war had turned it into a battlefield, every building reduced to rubble, every street a killing ground. But for Captain Alden Vance, it was still home, and no one was going to take it from him. Vance's breath came in short bursts, as he crouched low behind the ruined remains of a concrete wall. His eyes scanned the perimeter, searching for any movement, any sign of the Gormarians. They were close. He could feel it. The quiet before the storm was always the worst, and this moment, this silence, was deafening. The distant crack of gunfire echoed in the air, followed by a series of explosions that shook the ground beneath him. It was happening, the final push. The Gormarians were massing their forces, preparing for a last-ditch effort to wipe out humanity once and for all. Marisol Cole, his most trusted lieutenant, crouched beside him, her hand on the rifle at her side, her face lit only by the dim light that filtered through the crumbling buildings. "They're ready," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tension that hung between them. "This is it." Vance nodded grimly. They had come so far, fought so hard, but now the stakes were higher than ever. The Gormarians had come to Earth with the expectation that their superior firepower would crush humanity, that the humans would cower in fear, surrendering to their fate. But the Gormarians had underestimated something they had never anticipated: the sheer willpower of the human spirit. This world was theirs, and they would die before letting it fall into alien hands. "We end this now," Vance muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "One final assault. We take the mothership." Marisol's eyes locked onto his, understanding the magnitude of the mission. "We go in. We go all the way. No turning back." The air was thick with smoke, the smell of burning debris and scorched earth clinging to their skin as they moved through the city, weaving between crumbling structures and charred remains of vehicles. The distant hum of Gormarian weaponry reverberated through the streets as Vance's squad, a mix of seasoned fighters and new recruits, silently crept closer to the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Up ahead, the Gormarian mothership loomed, a dark silhouette against the ashen sky. It hovered just above the city, its engines casting a dim red glow, a stark contrast to the pale blue light of Earth's dying sun. The ship was massive, its hulking form surrounded by a web of defensive turrets, a gauntlet of destruction waiting to tear anything that came too close into pieces. But humanity had learned long ago how to fight in the shadows, how to slip past the monsters of their world and strike when least expected. Vance's plan was simple: get to the mothership, disable the outer defenses, and infiltrate the heart of the ship. Once inside, they would tear apart the Gormarian command center and cripple their operations. If they succeeded, they would break the Gormarians' will to fight. If they failed, Earth would fall. The first challenge came when they reached the base of the mothership. The area was crawling with Gormarian sentries, their hulking figures scanning the landscape with cold, mechanical precision. Vance's pulse quickened, but his expression remained calm, focused. The soldiers around him looked to him for guidance, their trust unwavering. He couldn't afford to let them down. "Take out the sentries." Quietly, Vance ordered. The squad split up, moving swiftly and silently, their movements practiced, the adrenaline of the mission pumping through their veins. The first sentry fell without a sound, a single shot to the head. The others followed suit, each strike clean, each one bringing them closer to their goal. As they crept toward the mothership, Vance couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air was too still, the city too quiet. Every fiber of his being screamed that they were walking into a trap. But there was no time for hesitation. They had to act now, or the Gormarians would finish what they started. The plan was working. They were inside the perimeter, past the defenses, and closing in on their target. Vance could feel the weight of their mission, But he also felt something else. A strange calmness. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. If they were going to change the future of Earth, they had to succeed. There was no room for failure. The entrance to the mothership loomed ahead, a massive airlock sealed tight, humming with energy. Vance motioned for the team to stop. He looked at Marisol, who nodded in silent understanding. They had to breach the airlock, but the guards were still stationed inside. "We hit them hard and fast," Vance whispered. "We don't stop until we're inside." With a collective breath, the squad moved in, storming the airlock with precision. The first wave of Gormarian soldiers was caught off guard, their screams swallowed by the chaos of gunfire and explosion. Vance led the charge, his rifle steady as he fired shot after shot, each one finding its mark. His team followed, taking down the enemy with ruthless efficiency. As the last of the Gormarian soldiers fell, the airlock doors slid open, revealing the dark metallic interior of the mothership. The hum of the ship's core filled their ears, a constant reminder of the power that lay within its walls. But Vance and his team were undeterred. They moved forward, their weapons raised, eyes sharp and focused. Inside, the Gormarians fought back with everything they had left, but it wasn't enough. Vance's team pushed through the ship, leaving destruction in their wake, until they reached the command center. The door was massive, reinforced by layers of alien metal, but Vance knew it was only a matter of time before they would break through. "Get ready," Vance muttered. "This is..." With one final push, they breached the command center, finding the heart of the Gormarian operation. The room was filled with alien technology, screens flashing with data, alien consoles blinking with lights, and the low whir of machinery. At the center stood the Gormarian general, Draxith, who was already preparing to make his final stand. Draxith's eyes locked onto Vance's, as the humans flooded into the room, their weapons raised, and their faces hard with resolve. "You think you've won?" Draxith snarled, his voice thick with frustration. "The Galactic Council will never allow this." Vance stepped forward, his face grim. "The Council, they're irrelevant now. Earth is ours, and we'll make sure it stays that way." The battle that followed was brutal, but it was over quickly. With a few calculated shots, the Gormarian general fell, his massive form collapsing to the floor with a thud that reverberated through the ship. Vance stood over him, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He had done it. They had done it. Earth was free. As the mothership began to disintegrate around them, Vance gave the order to leave. The mission was complete, but the war was not over. The Gormarians were defeated, but there would be others. There always were. But for now, for this moment, humanity had triumphed. As they exited the ship, the first rays of dawn began to pierce the smoke-filled sky. Earth, once thought to be a death world, had proven itself to be the cradle of a species that refused to be conquered. The future was uncertain, but Vance knew one thing: humanity would never be the same again. They had risen from the ashes, and now they would fight to ensure that no one would ever again underestimate the power of Earth. The battle had raged for hours, but for Captain Draxath, it felt like a lifetime. The city around him was a ruin, a monument to the destruction that had come with his underestimation of Earth and its inhabitants. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp scent of burning metal, and the ground beneath his boots seemed to shift with every step, as if the planet itself were moving in protest. His soldiers were fewer now, scattered across the broken streets, their morale crumbling as quickly as the city. The Gormarians, who had once felt invincible, were now fighting for their very survival. They had come to Earth expecting to conquer, to crush what they had thought was a primitive world. But they had been wrong. The final clash had begun with an explosive fury. Gormarian ships, once the pinnacle of their technological superiority, now lay smoldering in the distance, their engines silent and useless. The humans had proven more resilient than anyone could have imagined, their guerrilla tactics and brutal creativity turning the tide of the war. The Gormarians had underestimated the fury of a species cornered by an enemy they could not understand. They had underestimated humanity. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Vance stood at the heart of it all, his hands stained with the marks of battle, his eyes burning with the intensity of the fight. His men and women had fought with everything they had, against impossible odds, against a superior enemy, and against the very notion that they should be anything less than masters of their own fate. Vance's voice echoed over the comms, steady and unwavering, as the final offensive surged. "This is our home, and no one takes it from us." The Gormarians had never seen anything like this before. They had believed Earth to be a death world, a place where survival was a matter of luck. But what they had failed to account for was that humanity had not only survived Earth's brutal conditions, they had thrived. They had become stronger, more adaptable, and more resourceful with each generation. Now they stood, not as victims, but as the victim. On the battlefield, Draxath's eyes locked with Vance's, across the burning cityscape. For a moment, there was a strange stillness, a silent recognition between the two leaders. Draxath, though battered, was not finished yet, but his pride, once unshakable, was gone. The Gormarians had underestimated the humans' will to fight, and now they were paying the price. Vance moved forward, his boots crunching over the charred ground, as his soldiers closed in around the alien leader. Captain Draxath, Vance's voice cut through the air like a knife, calm but deadly serious. You came to Earth thinking you could control us. You thought we were weak, but you were wrong. This planet isn't a death world to us. It's home. Draxath's shoulders tensed, but he did not speak. He simply watched as the humans advanced, their faces marked with exhaustion and resolve. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear but from a growing understanding of the depth of his mistake. He had believed that the Gormarian way, the might of their fleet and their technology, would be enough to crush humanity. He had believed that Earth would break beneath their superior force. Instead, it had been the Gormarians who had broken, shattered by the sheer will of a species that had been shaped by the most hostile environment in the galaxy. Vance took another step closer, his voice soft but carrying the weight of a man who had fought for everything he held dear. You came here to destroy us, but you forgot one thing. Humans don't need to conquer a world to survive. We already have one. We survive, not because we're lucky, but because we make our own luck. Draxath looked around at the destruction, his heart sinking as the realization set in. The Gormarians had been defeated, not by superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but by the indomitable spirit of a species that had learned to survive against all odds. As the last of his soldiers fell, Draxath's gaze shifted to the horizon. He could see the remnants of his fleet, broken and burning, scattered across Earth's surface like the wreckage of a dream. He had lost, and it was not just his army that had been crushed. It was his belief in Gormarian superiority. Vance's eyes softened for a moment, his expression becoming more solemn. You don't have to die today, Draxath. Leave. Your fleet is finished. Earth is not yours to take. Draxath stood motionless, torn between his pride and the undeniable truth before him. The fight had cost him everything. The Gormarian fleet, his soldiers, his very belief in their mission. He was beaten, but even now, part of him refused to accept it. You think you've won? Draxath finally spoke, his voice hoarse but laced with a bitter laugh. You may have conquered us, but you have no idea what you're facing. The Galactic Council. They will come for you. They will not let this stand. Vance's expression hardened, and his eyes narrowed. The Galactic Council. They'll have to get in line. Because Earth, our home, is not going anywhere, and we won't be ruled by anyone, not by you, not by them. The finality of Vance's words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Earth had won. Humanity had proven that no force, no empire, no power in the galaxy could ever subjugate them, not when they had everything to fight for. The war had been long, the losses great, but humanity's triumph was complete. As Draxath turned and began to retreat, his heart weighed down by defeat, Vance watched him go, not with anger, but with a quiet, resolute pride. This was the world that had shaped him, the world that had shaped them all, and now, it was theirs to protect. Behind Vance, his soldiers gathered, battered and bloodied but unbroken. They had fought not just for survival, but for the right to exist on their own terms, to stand tall in the face of overwhelming odds and say, we are Earth, and we will not fall. The world around them, scarred and ravaged, would rebuild. The scars would remain as a reminder of the battle fought and won, but they would not define humanity's future. Earth was no longer just a death world. It was a testament to humanity's strength, a living proof that even in the face of extinction, humans would adapt, rise and fight, until the very last breath. The battle was over, but for the first time in history the universe would know the truth. Earth was no longer just a planet to be feared. It was a force to be reckoned with. And humanity had proven that there was no world too harsh, no enemy too great, no challenge too impossible, because Earth was home, and no one could take that from them. Vance looked up at the sky where the smoke of the battle still lingered like a fading storm. A new dawn was coming, and humanity would rise with it, stronger than ever before.